All right. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. As folks trickle in, we will be getting started shortly, but we are just so grateful for everyone that decided to join this afternoon, and we will share some really brief context before we dive into a conversation with all of our wonderful speakers that have joined us today. So I'll go ahead and start the session off. Bonjour, Croix Indigiqueers. Hello, my name is Croix, and I'm the Program Manager for Community Engagement at Native Governance Center. Today, I'm zooming in from Casa Grande, which is the homelands of the O'odham and Pipash peoples, kind of in between Phoenix and Tucson, Arizona. On behalf of Native Governance Center, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who is able to join us today. For those of you who are not familiar with us, Native Governance Center is a Native-led nonprofit that supports Native nations in strengthening their governance systems and their capacity to exercise their sovereignty. We encourage you to learn more about our programming if you want to check out our website at nativegov.org, or you can follow us on social media at nativegov. Today's event is titled Sacred Voices, Learning from Indigiqueer and Two-Spirit Leaders. And today we're hoping to explore the role of Two-Spirit and Indigiqueer identities a little bit within Indian country, their importance, history, and also their current realities. And we're going to be learning for some really cool Native leaders who are doing work across Turtle Island in a variety of roles. And in these roles, they're really contributing to power building and Native narrative change, which is just really beautiful work. And so I'm honored that we're joined by them today and that we'll get to hear from them a little bit later. And really just through their insights and experiences shared, we hope to be able to allow folks to learn more about the diversity across leadership in Indian country and really hopefully inspire some action that will support our leaders as well. And so before we dive into today's conversation, we do want to just share a few quick housekeeping items. So first, if you do have questions for our panelists, you'll be able to submit those today using the Q&A box on Zoom. And we will have a dedicated Q&A portion towards the end of the event, so save those for later on. And this event is being closed captioned. So if you want those captions on, you can turn those on by using the button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And then we also just want to highlight the photo that you're going to see throughout today's event. This is by Two-Spirit artist Ryan Young, who is from the Lac du Flambeau band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, and it's titled The Creator is Two-Spirit. This piece is currently on display at the Krenner Art Museum, and it's part of this larger installation by Ryan Young called We Define Ourselves. And the artist remarks that the work on view, quote, cannot be identified as solely one part of my identity or the other. And so we're really honored to uplift Ryan's work throughout today's event and really just thrilled to see more and more folks joining and appreciating Two-Spirit artists and their many contributions. And so we do want to start just by talking about why this topic, why today. And we just want to acknowledge that our queer and trans relatives are really the ongoing targets of a lot of violence and harmful policies, both across Indian country, but also beyond. And so we want to affirm that queer and trans relatives have always existed in our communities and are going to continue to be part of our communities. And pre-colonization, Two-Spirit people really played important roles in Indigenous communities across Turtle Island. And in many of our communities, this ability to hold both the masculine and the feminine really had extending responsibilities and roles, which elevated our Two-Spirit people oftentimes into roles of leadership or just really integral roles within our communities. But with colonization, many, if not all of these roles got disrupted. And so Two-Spirit people who refused to abandon their ways and assimilate were really harshly penalized. And this included imprisonment, having their families punished, going beyond themselves, having rations or other treaty rights withheld. And with this newest administration in the US, we're seeing executive orders really rooted in colonialism that ignore the cultures of the land. And so we really call upon tribal leaders to engage in governance that includes, supports, and protects our queer and trans relatives, and also really uplifts and affirms their traditional roles within our communities. And for our for our non-native allies and accomplices, we really encourage you to take action in your local communities and consider how you can support Indigiqueer and also LGBTQ plus people more broadly. And we also want to take a moment and talk a little bit about some of the language that we're using today. And so you may or may not be familiar with these terms already. And so we just want to take a moment to define things. And just as a note, many Indigenous languages across Turtle Island and globally are gender neutral. And so we'll dive into that a little bit later. But there are two pretty specific terms that we're using today. And the first is Two-Spirit. And so this is a term that is exclusive to Indigenous people, and it could be used to refer to non-binary people or those who identify as LGBTQ+. Two-Spirit was actually agreed upon as a community term led by Elder Myra Laramie at the third annual Intertribal Native American First Nations Gay and Lesbian Gathering in Winnipeg, Manitoba, in 1990. So it's a term that's been around for a while. And Two-Spirit actually comes from the Anishinaabe phrase, Nij Meneduag, and apologies, my Anishinaabe is rough. But today, people from many different Native nations use the term Two-Spirit to describe themselves, but it doesn't mean that all Native nations recognize Two-Spirit people in the same way. Again, we're really culturally diverse. And so oftentimes there are going to be culturally specific social or ceremonial roles within each Native nation that are connected to the Two-Spirit identity. And Two-Spirit people now are really reviving these roles and traditions and reclaiming these identities. But again, what that looks like can really vary widely. And then we also want to just touch on this language of Indigiqueer. And so this is just a broader term for Indigenous people within the LGBTQ plus identities. And this term really just acknowledges that not all Indigenous people that are LGBTQ plus identify as Two-Spirit. Because this and similar community-specific terms do have that cultural or role significance within respective communities, some folks just might not feel that Two-Spirit or a similar community-specific term applies to them or accurately represents them. And so the spirit and term Indigiqueer, also spelled with an E sometimes, was created in 2004 out of work from the Vancouver Queer Film Festival. And the person who coined the term wrote, I really liked the idea of Indigiqueer because queer is kind of a confrontational label. It's one of those old reclamations that makes people uncomfortable. Indigenous isn't a really confrontational label, although everything else about it is because we are all still all over the globe resisting. So putting the two together makes this word I really liked. And I just want to uplift that. And before we dive into our panel, speaking about the language and maybe what the land remembers or what is traditionally in our language and communities, many languages across Turtle Island are gender neutral, and this includes Anishinaabe. And so our language really avoids assumptions about gender and sex when speaking and writing. And I want to give quick shout outs to the accounts at First Full Circle Indigenous and Giiwedin Bruce for the images used here today. I think they really beautifully just call out this difference in language and how it translates to a difference in identity as well. And then I want to give a brief introduction for our moderators and panelists today. For our moderator, we have Giiwedin, and Giiwedin is a descendant of the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe and an enrolled member of the St. Croix Chippewa Indians of Wisconsin. They are a Two-Spirit Anishinaabe influencer, educator, and water protector, and they use platforms like TikTok and Instagram to share really great free educational content. And in 2002, Giiwedin was honored in GLAAD's 20 Under 20 list for their activism. And recently, they have also ventured into modeling. And so, through this multifaceted work, Giiwedin really continues to inspire and advocate for Indigenous and LGBTQ communities across Turtle Island. And for our panelists, we have three really amazing folks today. We have Susan Allen, who is an attorney and shareholder at the Jacobson Law Group in St. Paul, Minnesota. And it's here that she represents tribes and tribal entities on a full range of matters, from really complex commercial transactions to construction law, finance, and more. And Susan is a member of the Rosebud Sioux tribe and really has a dedication to public service, which propelled her to the Minnesota State House of Representatives for 3 terms from 2012 to 2018, where she was elected as its first Native American female member and the first Native American LGBTQ plus to serve in any state legislature. And she moved from place to place during her childhood to various Indian reservations and urban Indian communities. And this experience really still influences her and her call to service. She raised a son as a single parent and then went on to law school to get 2 degrees, which influences her work now. We also have Isaac Casados, a Diné political leader who has nearly 2 decades of experience in advocacy and community engagement. He serves as secretary for the Democratic Party of New Mexico and vice president of CNN Hero Award-winning Moving Arts Espanola. He's a seasoned campaign strategist who's helped elect LGBTQ plus candidates to the New Mexico House and Senate. And in 2023, he became the first openly gay Native American executive officer in the state's Democratic Party. He is also serving as a board member for the Victory Fund campaign. And we also have Jordan Dresser, who's a member of the Northern Arapaho tribe located on the Wind River Indian Reservation in central Wyoming. He's a graduate of the University of Wyoming with a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism and a Master of Arts in Museum Studies from the University of San Francisco. Dresser served as chairman of the Northern Arapaho tribe, and he's a filmmaker, and his latest film, Who She is screening across the country. Currently, he's serving as curator of collections at the Fort Collins Museum of Discovery. So if you want to, in your own way, welcome our speakers and our moderator today who are bringing some incredible knowledge, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Giiwedin, who's our moderator for this event. Miigwech, Giiwedin.
Miigwech Cree, I firstly just wanted to say thank you for that housekeeping and also thank you for the introductions. I'm very thankful to be joined by everyone here today, and I'm excited to moderate this panel, Sacred Voices, Learning from Indigiqueer and Two-Spirit Leaders with Jordan, Isaac, and Susan. I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit. Giiwedin Indigiqueer Mukwin Indun Dame Gazagasqua Jamaica Ijinakazo Ishganigan. Hi, my name is Giiwedin, which means North Wind in Ojibwe. I'm Bear Clan, and I grew up on the Leech Lake Reservation. And I wouldn't call myself a leader, but I would acknowledge and know that I am a voice, and that's something that I have been coming into and learning more about and how to use that in a good way. And so I'm just very excited to be here with 3 leaders that I am excited to ask these questions to and also learn from and just get inspired. So miigwech. I wanted to pass it on to either Jordan, Isaac, or Susan to introduce yourselves.
Well, Yate, good morning, everybody. It's great to see so many active individuals within this community. I think it's an incredibly important discussion. As Cree was talking about, it's been an incredible honor to not only serve in various capacities and become the first openly gay Native American individual to actually hold a statewide executive position within the Democratic Party of New Mexico. And not only that, but nationally. And it's about bridging that divide and making sure that if there's not a seat at the table, that we bring our own chair. And that has been one of the things that I think is so incredibly important as we continue to advocate, as we continue to engage. It's incredibly important for me to continue to have these type of conversations and be a part of these dialogues, so that we can educate, we can inform, and break down any stereotypes that other individuals have about us as Native individuals within this space. So with that, I'll turn it over to Susan.
Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Allen, and I am Dakota from Yankton, and Lakota from Rosebud, and Anishinaabe from Whiter. And I'm very happy to be here. I'm a little out of practice. I'm semi-retired now. I'd still work full-time as an attorney, but I've always done that. But I just recently retired from about 4 boards, serving on board of directors, and then 2018 was my last year serving, was public service. So these events used to be regular occasions for me, and it was a really great time to kind of work with communities, with Two-Spirit communities, and with inner city urban areas. And so I really miss it. So I'm really happy to be invited to participate here. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jordan. I just want to thank you all for being a part of this as well. And, my main thing is I've been working in museums for a long time, and people always kind of wonder, and I also film work too. But my main thing, especially in those spaces, in all spaces, is the fact that with children, they say that if they see somebody who looks like them and sounds like them in certain spots, then they know it's a possibility for them. So I think it's so important that we be in all these spaces to show these young kids everywhere that these are possibilities for them, and that we continue to advocate in good ways, but also that we show that there's this power of storytelling goes beyond not only the place that you're in, but that as Native people, we're everywhere. And I just think that's so important that we just be leaders that model that as well, but also open the doors for the next generation to come in so that they'll do the same, and that we continue this on.
Thank y'all. I wanted to also just ask if you could describe your identity and how it has shaped your leadership and work in each of y'all's respective communities.
Well, I'll go ahead and take the first crack at this. So I go by he, him, and it's been really important for me to be able to not only assimilate into some of these really key areas. One of the things that I think is really difficult when you enter politics, and I think Susan can talk about this, is you're typically judged by how you look and how you act. And most people have a tremendous amount of misconceptions of how a member of the LGBTQ community or a two-spirited individual is supposed to act, or to what their perceived notion of what a Native American within that space should be doing. And I've learned that governance models are very, very interesting. For me, I'm more behind the political apparatus, so not front-facing as far as a member of the Senate or a House or a specific governing body. But for us, it's always about trying to figure out how do we go out there and find individuals that can run in key areas that are incredibly important. As Cree alluded to, I helped run one of the first campaigns for the first openly gay HIV positive individual to be elected to the New Mexico House. And that was an incredibly productive race, because it showed that an individual that had been marginalized or had been beaten up in many communities could actually win in a very conservative district. In addition, we got the first male elected, openly gay man elected to the New Mexico State Senate. And it was incredibly important because it opened up a bridge, and it started that discussion where people who might otherwise not engage with us, may not see us as important, are now seeing us as not only thought leaders, but individuals that are going to bring forth important legislation. My work at the Victory Fund, which is the largest organization that gets members of the LGBTQ elected all across this country, from small really consequential races such as city councils or school boards, all the way up to members of Congress. And it's about being part of that. So using my identity to be able to influence that conversation and make sure that individuals that are seeking office or have a voice or have a story to tell have that experience. So with that, I'll turn it over to Susan.
Thank you, Isaac. I think this is a really part that, you know, we talk about pronouns and some languages there are no pronouns or very few, and then we use like kinship terms or honorific terms. And so I'm a sister, an auntie, a grandma, a great grandma, and a wife, and community member, and elder. And then my identity is something is going to be a lifelong process, because it's, you know, we're all impacted by trauma. So to become trauma informed in our, you know, how we interact with people, so that we can improve our relationships with our relatives and our significant others in our community. And then also just to have a sense of direction in life, and to have some sort of vision and identity that's maybe unique to us, and to have healthy relationships. So all of that is a lifelong process, and it starts out pretty rough, I think, for many of us. And as far as I think what you were talking about, Isaac, about in professional life, in how we, I think I've always admired those who are, I mean, I've always been out, and but I always admired those who could express their identity through art and dress and dance and song, and it's I always consider them very brave, and just but one of the things that I think what Isaac and I think Jordan was talking about is about how when we go into places where there have not been Two-Spirit or Native people, then we transform those places that we go into to serve or lead. And so when I first served in the legislature, I was the first Native American female and Two-Spirit, and the expectation, you know, people didn't really know how to react. But what did I bring to the legislature? Well, I brought different perspectives. I brought, I may not look that different from any, you know, other legislator or attorney or Native person, but what my identity, part of my identity is to be, is that I am serving a role within a community. So when every place I go, I bring that community with me. So when we serve as community-centered people, we bring those people with us into those spaces where we go, and we transform them. And so that I felt like that was something that, you know, after I served in the Minnesota House, there were 4 or 5 other women, Native women that followed. And so I think that's my sort of concept of identity, so, and my own identity.
For me, you know, I use he, him, and I think, you know, for my time when I was on council, what was always kind of thrown in my face wasn't that. Mine was my age, you know, because I was one of the younger ones, and people would constantly be like, well, kind of, what do you know? Because I was younger. And then that was difficult to navigate. But what I kind of realized was that, you know, especially for tribal people, you know, sometimes they're just trying to get through the day. And I think that being able to relate to them in that aspect, and what are we doing for our people? And I think that's as a whole, like, how are we moving this forward? Because we go through so many traumas and different things a day, and it's how to navigate those. I think that once you can relate to them on those different aspects, it gets a little bit more easier. I always constantly thought about, you know, our chief systems, you know, from the Northern Arapaho, we had various chiefs that we come from, you know, and I would memorize them and think of their power and the things that they did. And I always would think about what would they do? what would they do in these situations, you know? And I, on my work phone, I had a screensaver of Chief Black Hole because he was somebody who I admired so greatly. And that's who I always thought about, because these political systems today we're still learning them, you know, because they weren't ours. And we're trying to navigate them. But I always think back to that and the power of tribal sovereignty. The power of tribal sovereignty is that each nation can do what they want, and nobody else should be able to tell them what to do. And I think that's a really true power that we have. And I think that that goes back to creating this new generation who's recognizing those things as well, but also being comfortable with who they are, you know, and being truly, because I think if you don't know who you are, then you're not going to be an effective leader, because then you're still questioning yourself. So it's like, first come to those things first, and then everything else will come to you.
Miigwech, thank y'all. I wanted to ask for the second question, if you could share a success story of a tribal governance model that uplifts Two-Spirit leaders, or a story of how Indigiqueer people are reclaiming their traditional roles within their native nations today.
Well, I think the three of us probably exemplify that key governance model that's already beginning. It's one, having the conversation; two, being proactively involved in the discussion; and three, trying to create policy that helps shift our mentality and our focus away from whatever stereotype or misconception may exist about individuals from our communities that are not only Indigiqueer, but also Two-Spirited, and how best we can best represent that. I think I can speak to maybe what we've done at the Victory Fund in looking at key individuals, and even those that are at Native Political Action Alliance, and what they're doing as well, where we've looked at key leaders that are primed to run, or looking at participating in their communities, whether they're running for a local council race, or they're looking at a legislative race or a federal race. One, providing them the resources so that, number one, they have the education as to what it requires to be a political candidate. I think a lot of individuals within our space want to lead, but they don't know how to get there. They don't know how to raise money. They don't know how to do call time. They don't know how to address the key issues that may be a benefit for them as a candidate with a voice. Two, also making sure that they have the financial support, and how best we can move them forward in a way where they are a competitive candidate for these specific offices. And then three, educating our local governments and our tribal leaders within those respective areas to understand the importance of what that candidate provides, and how best they can increase their participation, not only from their voting electorate, but also participating in the discussion of how best we can represent not only our needs and our concerns as a marginalized community, but other marginalized communities that may exist nationally, and how best we can help uplift all stories collectively together. So I'm going to more address it from a national perspective versus kind of what we're doing on a local level. But I think it's all relevant at a normal level. But with that, I'll turn it over to Susan.
Thank you. A little trouble with that button there. This is an area that I don't have a lot of experience in tribal governance models. So models to me, I mean, as a an attorney, and we represent almost exclusively tribal governments and tribal entities. So I'm very familiar working in tribal governance structures, as far as you know, providing services and anti-discrimination laws, and I think so I think I'll just speak to that. I mean, I'm very inspired by the few leaders I'm aware of that are Two-Spirit who have served on tribal councils, and the only ones I know of are they're Choctaw, or there's a transgender, I think, Choctaw who was a leader in the community, and then Montana, the Blackfeet Nation, I believe there was I think your name was Alina Crow, but tribal in how we help tribes govern is through policies, laws, and I've noticed a shift with all the federal funding, especially during COVID, ARPA, COVID funding, that it comes with restrictions, and one of those restrictions is anti-discrimination laws. And that's something that, they say, well, tribes they're sovereign, they don't have to adhere to anti-discrimination laws. They can you have preference for Indians and for their members, and all that's fine. That doesn't touch on that. But when it comes to services, making sure that you're not discriminating in performance of services, that's something that is a condition of accepting that funding. So, and a lot of tribes don't have policies that are broad in that manner. So I think that's been an opportunity to strengthen tribal governance policies to meet the federal requirements, but at the same time be tribal specific and be useful in protecting Two-Spirit communities and access to healthcare and access to important services. Jordan.
Well, I come from a state where a very big tragedy happened, Wyoming is where Matthew Shepard took place. And then if you think about that, was in the 90s, and I was way younger back then, but I started a whole shift in the conversations within the state, because Wyoming's a very conservative state. And it started a shift of these conversations of like, how do you protect individuals? How do we stop something like this from happening? And I think it trickled down to the tribal area as well. I'm proud of the fact that the tribes have both adopted harassment policies, that protect their employees in different ways as well, and I think it's open enough where people can interpret a threat the way they feel that it's a threat towards them, and then we don't have to decipher and tell that person, well, no, a threat would be this, it'd be that. No, it'd be like, well, if you feel threatened, that's it, and I think that's enough. That's really, it's helpful in a lot of different ways. But also, I think it's just the fact that we're shifting and we're moving in a way that is showing these different sides of what it means to be Native. And that includes Two-Spirit, and that includes those different things as well. And I really love that, because I think that for so long we were in different boxes. And I think that we're kind of breaking out of them and we're showing them across, this is what we're doing. And I just think that's really powerful. And I think it's something that we should just keep pushing towards in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I see that the boxes that were put in, and also just the pan-Indianism, and the not the expectation, but the idea that we are a monolith when we're not. And yeah, it's so important to break away from that. For the third question, I wanted to ask, what is one change y'all hope to see in Two-Spirit and Indigiqueer identities in the ways that they're honored in governance, culture, and or daily life?
Well, I think it's incredibly important that, one, we begin working with our own local communities to begin breaking down even the stigmas that still exist within our tribal communities. We still have today many policies that are anti-LGBTQ all across tribal nations. We have anti-gay marriage laws that still exist all throughout Indian country, and we need to do our very best to address what those key issues are. To addressing the complexity of pronouns, and even the basis of being able to identify somebody by what they feel is correct. I think three, a re-education about our history within our own tribal communities. Give you one example, I'm Navajo, and Two-Spirit individuals were revered. They were the religious leaders. They were the individuals that you sought expertise and guidance from. And with colonialism and with Christianity coming along, we lost that sense of traditional and cultural understanding of who we were as people within our communities and our environments. And I think number four, making sure that we collectively as a whole, as a marginalized body, understanding one, as Native Americans were marginalized, but two, adding in the LGBTQ two-spirited and Indigiqueer perspective, we have to do whatever we can, not only to support and uplift our communities, but the communities of every other racial community, every other group that is facing the same trials and tribulations that we are. And so it's about creating a collective body of individuals that understand this, and that we do what we can to champion together. And I think that's kind of one of my key hopes. If I had a magic wand in my hand, that I think we work on our house first, and then go out there and try to help educate state and national and international perspectives around where we are as a people.
And go next. I think one change that I'm thinking about is education and then reclaiming cultural roles and revitalization, I guess is a good word. But I think the supporting for tribal leaders and for at this point it seems state and federal is difficult to even want to go there. But tribal, I mean, we could still focus on tribal and education, so curriculum and early education. We all went through like sex education, and so there's been a lot of effort to reform that education to be more inclusive and real and authentic. So it seems to me that, you know, it goes back to our identity. I mean, it formed really young, and how, you know, the violence in school and the bullying and and then, you know, that we don't have the programs that needed to support students that have unique needs, or we tend to like isolate them. And so that was something that I was isolated my entire elementary and up until I quit school, and is because I was what they would call gifted. So as soon as I would take the first test or I would automatically be pulled out of the classroom and put in a special, and sometimes by myself, other times there may be two. And I actually went to a school in Northfield, Minnesota in the 5th grade. I think there was like 14 of us in the gifted. They actually had a theater program. So it was like, but the thing is that, well, how much did I miss? How much did they miss? And I spent my college like helping tutoring. That's how I learned it as well. So how much are we missing by not being people allowing kids to be authentic, to have unique their unique personalities or abilities, and then be able to talk about those differences and so I think that sort of culture, that revitalization, that reform of our early education, that's something that tribes, I think, you know, have the people, you know, that are culturally knowledgeable, elders, that all the resources they need to do that. And so just supporting that, I think that's one change that it's sort of self-determination that tribal leaders can support and put resources behind.
I think it's just the power of us having a strong foundation and teaching the power of self-respect. I think that's the first things first, you know. If you have respect for yourself, then you will have respect for others, you know, and making sure that we're included in these spaces, such as I'm talking about domestic violence, you know, and those different things happen. But also, I think because reservations are so isolated and small, the populations are small, you know, so therefore you see somebody who is like you, you know, and then you're like, okay, and then I guess I'm meant to be with this person, even if they're really toxic, you know. I think a lot of times people settle, you know, and that's really unfortunate. but having respect for each other, because I think that sometimes, you know, historically, men have been very misogynistic towards women. I think gay men can be really misogynistic towards straight women, you know. I think it's breaking those things down and saying things like that are not okay, you know. And I think that we have to get those things we got to get those things good, because I think that we're in for a really tough ride these next 4 years, you know, and marginalized groups will turn on each other, you know, and you kind of see those different things kind of happening. And I think that we have to be really strong for those things, because tribes can get isolated, you know, with DIE, you know, we're not DIE, we're tribes, we have treaty rights, we're different. And therefore, we're going to be viewed as different. And I think things are just going to get broken down a little bit, and those things all trickle down, you know? So we just got to have that respect for ourselves first, and then maneuver in a way that's
Miigwech. Thank y'all. I wanted to ask another question, and that is just, what steps can our current tribal leaders take to ensure governance structures fully include and support us Two-Spirit folks and Indigiqueer relatives?
You know, I think this is an incredibly important conversation. Actually, just behind me, I just got out of the All Pueblo Council of Governors meeting. So all 19 Pueblo governors that make up New Mexico's leadership meet once a month. And I think the key question is, sometimes our tribal leaders, because they change constantly. We have some tribes that you'll look at a 1 year, 2 year, 4 year government structure. The education, I think, is really on us to continue dripping upon them why our voices are incredibly important. I think a lot of times we go into an environment assuming that people understand who we are, understanding the trials and tribulations and traumas that Susan talked about that we all hold. And it's really about us making sure that we're having those key conversations, reaching out to those tribal leaders, being an advocate for other issues that are important to them as well, so that they see us as an ally and not necessarily as a nuisance. I think once tribal leadership understands that we are equally involved in this fight for justice, for policy change, for advocacy that helps uplift our communities, from water to trust treaty responsibilities all the way through, then they see us as partners at the table. And that's really one way that we're going to be able to chip away at this large iceberg that exists within our communities, that we're now having to rebuild after years of being sought out for our advice, or years after being looked at as the person who brought some key element of knowledge. So with that, I'll turn it over to Susan.
Thanks, Susan. So I think the people that are watching this, hopefully, in community, Native people in communities, urban communities, and reservation communities, know what steps need to be taken. And so I think that's what I would focus on, is not so much, you know, we all know that we have a list, each one of us, but I think it's important to have what we call an ask, to be able to articulate a concrete action that we think tribal leadership should take. And so that when we have the opportunity to address the tribal leaders, that it's going to be a very brief, we might only have like a minute, and to be able to say, this is our ask, this is the need, this is our ask, and get their commitment to work on that. And then I might have to ask them again. And so whether we're asking for, you know, acknowledgement of Two-Spirit, the roles, the healers, the spiritual leaders, whether we want anti-discrimination policies, or whether we want more representation of Two-Spirit in tribal governance, or whether we want to create programs, or if we want provide specific types of mental health or healthcare services to specific address a specific need in the Two-Spirit community. So I think that that's really a skill that all of us, I think, can work on, is we know what the needs are in our communities, and we just have to keep asking, and we have to have some sort of concrete action that would address them and help our leaders to they have the power to implement and to adopt them, to fund them. But we have a big role in that.
I think it's just the power of including people to the table, because not one person doesn't know everything. I think that's why it's so important that you have people you trust, and also give the experts and who've been in those fields a seat at the table and let them talk. Like I didn't know much about oil and gas, and that's why I relied on the other council members who did, and I learned, but it was being able to be like, okay, this a little bit more, so I'm gonna let you have the floor, but also educating myself. I think as in people, we need to do that across the board, not just these topics, but everywhere, and being able to say, because it's only if we come together and do that, are we ever going to move forward as communities.
Me, Glitch again. I wanted to move to the last question before we open up for Q&A, but it's just a call to action, and it's, what is one piece of advice you'd give to a young Two-Spirit or Indigiqueer person navigating their identity and their role in their community?
I think one key takeaway, if anything else, for a young individual is you're not alone. I think a lot of us have gone through this exploration. I call it an exploration because I didn't really come out until I was in college. And the challenges that you face and the fear that you face is everything that we've gone through. And that you will always have support amongst a dynamic community who sees you for who you are, who respects who you are, who loves your identity, who wants to embrace you, and wants you to not only take your voice for what you feel that you need to give to this community, but wants to take your voice and spread it to the world, because it's that dynamic, it's that important. It breathes new life into our communities. So know that you're not alone, and you always have resources like myself, like Susan, like Jordan, and all of us that are on the Zoom today that will help you navigate this process, because we're great resources, and we've been there, and I myself am always available to help guide or help move people through these processes if there is ever an identity issue that's moving forward, and how best you can represent yourself in the community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Susan.
When I was in the legislature, my favorite part was getting invited to local schools within the district I represented, whether it's like grade school or junior high or and one of the things when I would speak with them, first of all, they would always say, like, well, you don't look like your picture. That was their first thought. And then they wanted to know how much money I made. And then the next, but I tried to turn it around and say that, that they are the most important persons when we're trying to figure out the state budget. I would tell them that the budget was like $40 billion in the state of Minnesota. And I said, who gets most of that money? And they would name various things. And I would say that they get the most money, that education was 40% of our budget. And that is, and the next thing I would challenge them to have some sort of, like, a lot of them were Native, to have some sort of time, to set aside time and to find a spiritual sort of guidance, or seek some sort of vision and some sort of direction in life. And so that when they're very young, they have a sense of direction, and that direction may change over time, because there'll be different experiences that'll change our direction, or different opportunities or circumstances in life. But to have some sense of of identity, and that what is your role going to be in our community, and that we're spending a whole bunch of money on on them to like be in this environment, and we wanted to make the best environment as possible for them, and why are they there, and so that I think would be just, I think young people have the sense that they're the most important, that we all are counting on them, but I think acknowledging that and sort of helping guide them to assume those roles, I think is what I would focus on, and encourage them to help each other to do that, to prepare them for what they're going to be doing, and to help our community and to live in our communities.
My advice is that, you know, we're all tribal people. And I think the key thing is don't be afraid to take part in your ceremonies, because there's a place for you there. And that's where you're going to find out who you really are and show you all the different sides of you. And that's one you can't run from, you know? And so I encourage everybody to take part in that, because it's a really rich life and it will carry you in a way that's meaningful. So that would be my advice.
Miigwech, sorry, I was having a hard time finding the button. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to add on to that a little bit, Jordan, the participating in ceremonies, Miigwech, for bringing that up, because that's something that I've recently just been finding myself going back to in terms of dance. And so I would say that powwow dance is ceremony, and dancing is movement is ceremony, and that's something that I've been very thankful to be able to take part in terms of dancing jingle dress. I'm Anishinaabe, and jingle dress comes from our people, and that is a healing dance. That's a woman's dance, and I identify as Giiwedin in our language and in our culture, and that's just I have a feminine nature and I have a feminine spirit. But yeah, that's something that is being welcomed in the communities that I have danced in, which has been beautiful. So up on Fond du Lac Reservation, there was nothing but love when I danced there. And then one of my friends from Leech Lake Reservation, who now lives here in Minneapolis, invited me to dance with the Jingle Dress Dancers at the Indian Health Board opening May 1st. So just being welcomed into these spaces is very beautiful and awesome. And it looks like I've been able to get one of the Q&A questions, so I wanted to ask that quickly. But I wanted to ask, what challenges do y'all anticipate under the current administration in Washington, D.C.?
Well, I think we're all trying to understand it, not only from a Native American perspective. I mean, we have a number of key cuts that are happening within the current build up to the 2026 budget. We see attacks that are happening at IHS. We see key areas of HIV/AIDS participation and models that are being taken away. Specific commodity appropriations the tribal communities are really reliant on that are potentially going to be taken away. You see issues from the Department of Education, what's going to happen to the Office of Indian Education under that department. So there's a lot of key issues. And I think one of the things that we're constantly having to remind this administration is we are not a part of the DEI scenario. These are trust obligations and trust responsibilities that an administration, whether it be Republican or Democrat, must adhere to. And they must provide us not only the governance skills, but also the funding to do our jobs and protect our people within our communities. But beyond that, it's about having that conversation, reaching out to your local Republican legislator. You may not agree with most of their issues, but if they don't know that you exist or you're not reaching out to them, then they're not going to advocate on your part. So looking at members, not only reaching out to potentially Lisa Murkowski from the Senate side poll in the U.S. House of Representatives to make sure that they continue to advocate for the responsibilities. One of the key areas, and I think all of you need to understand this, the 24th, 25th, and 26th of April, the new budget discussions will be happening in Washington, D.C. And this is where a tremendous amount of the cuts will probably begin to start happening, not only from DOJ, but other areas. So I would suggest that each and every one of you get actively involved in your communities, reach out to your tribal leadership, find ways that you can advocate to make sure that these important areas that not only affect our Indigiqueer and our two-spirited communities, but affect all of our tribal communities are protected and preserved. So with that, I'll turn it over to Susan.
I have a lot of faith in our tribal leaders' sophistication and the amount of money that some the wealthier tribes have spent on having a presence in Washington. And tribal sovereignty is strong, and we predate the Constitution. We have, but I'm going to trust that fight is going to be continue, and that we will continue to preserve sovereignty. The one part that is going to be a hardship and that is coming is the loss of services. CDC just cut off HIV funding and for harm reduction, and so programs that is just going to reduce, that are meant to bring people out of poverty. So that's something we have. That's not about tribal. So that's something we share in common with a lot of people in this country who are living at the margins, and that who rely on support resources to just get by and pay rent and eat and get to work, and so that is going. We're gonna be in good company. That is going to be to me, that is gearing up to be a backlash, a revolt. So we'll all be participating in that. And so there's going to be a lot of work to be done, and it's scary, but at the same time, we're not alone in any of these fights.
Well, I just think it's the fact that it's getting the next leaders ready. Like I think that's like people have talked to me about those different things, like kind of what's going on now, and I'm like, it's here, and we got to continue to fight, but it's like we got to get people ready, and sometimes those leaders don't even know they're ready, but everybody else can see it, and it's giving them the confidence to be like, okay, this is what's next, So I think it's getting ready. It's and with those ideas, and because I think that it's going to be a tough few years, because just Native culture across the board, just going to try to get erased in different ways, So I think we just got to get those strong people to the front and show them the most support that we can.
Well, I wanted to mention there's one book. It's called called Calling In. It's by Professor Loretta Ross. And I think I think that I think it speaks to the moment, as far as like she's a human rights advocate and older woman, and she talks about how she has spent a lot being trauma triggered and calling out people, and how that, and so sometimes just sitting on that, and then finding using our experience and intelligence to talk to people, and then calling in people, rather than having a culture war or having talking to people, and that we still have to call out hate groups, and we don't, but she gives a lot of really good insight, and I think it'd be a great book for like getting a different perspective on how we can get through this time.
Miigwech, Susan, I took a note down so I can go and get that book. With that, I wanted to turn over to Cree. Miigwech, for letting me moderate and ask questions to y'all.